Sono Emanuela Castellini, Radio 2 Quotidiani del Nord. Volevo chiedere a Colin Farrell come reputa il mestiere dell'attore e poi, visto che è stato insomma, c'è anche un regista qui, che rapporto c'è, che rapporto si instaura tra un attore e un regista? Può esserci un rapporto di amore e odio? Grazie, è difficile dirigerlo, insomma lei si affida totalmente.
What's it like to be an actor? I've no idea. It's, you know, still trying to figure. That's one of those unanswered questions that remains evasive. I love to be directed. Again, I love the collaboration. I love working with a director. I love a director who can push you into different areas, who can maybe himself ask a question and walk away without having to deliver the answer. And Gavin, working with Gavin, he set up, talk about a collaborative environment, he really did set up a workshop out of his apartment in New York where for 4 weeks before we started shooting, all the actors got together at various stages, first as a group for a general read-through, and then in increments we paired off, and it was just the most wonderful dialogue for 4 or 5 weeks before we started shooting. I love to be directed, yeah. I love to be, you know. I don't know if it can be love-hate. I have had that as well. It can be quite tenuous. You are inevitably exposing certain aspects of yourself, certain ideas, certain fears, certain hopes, and it could be, you know, acting can be, I find, can inspire great vulnerability at times. The one thing I think a lot of actors will say, the one thing that is imperative, I have found, with a director is trust. That's all, is trust. And if that trust is there, well then, the vulnerability is again, you know, a very fertile ground for creativity. You know, and I trust Gavin implicitly. I hate him, but I trust him. I don't like him, but I love him. I mean, it was easy work, really, really easy.
You add something to this?
Add something here, direct on.
Yes. Some confidence.
Yeah. Speak favourably about me, please.
Action. About my relationship with Colin?
Yes.
Well, I mean, Colin's one of these actors that, you use the word curiosity, that's where when he showed up, I think what was interesting is he didn't have any preconceptions of what he thought it should be, or the idea of like, this is the way I want to play things, because we started with this workshop. It began with just asking questions, and you know, he's a very curious guy, so he asked a lot of questions, and then it became sort of, in a way, like an investigative journalist or an archaeologist. He would go out and just discover and discover and discover, and that was sort of the building blocks of creating this character, was out of asking the questions without taking your ego out of it. And it was, you know, for me, you know, I guess Colin would be considered a movie star, but when he shows up, the first day he came to my apartment, and we had already met previously, but to show up to work, it wasn't like a movie star. It was like a guy who was just showing up, and let's roll up our sleeves and climb inside this thing. And I really appreciated that, and the continuation of the approach from day one until we finished was just one of commitment and dedication and passion and curiosity and caring. There were days where, you know, we worked on weekends, many weekends. A lot of times you think, like in the film, at least on our movie, I can speak to that, we would work 5-day weeks, and a lot of times people want to go out on the weekends and do whatever. We would work on Saturdays, Sundays. We'd get together in my apartment. We would go to locations and rehearse for a scene on Sunday that we were going to be shooting on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, and never, you know, there was never a no or like I don't have time. It was like, you know, he showed up to make a movie, and that's what we did.
Jason from Greece. I've got a question for both of you, actually. It's a bit tricky one. What you said about Colin is true. I've met Colin a number of times. I met him last year in Dublin when he was with Ronnie Wood at Scots. I've met him in London. I've met him in France, everywhere. I know he's genuinely a good person. What I wanted to ask you is, in a movie, when you have somebody like Edward Norton, I don't know how much you're aware of not, but Edward has a reputation of an arms. I wanted to know if you two found that out during filming the movie, as an actor and as a director, how would you cope with it? Can you cope with it? Will it bring a problem in the filming? I know what I'm talking about because I've met many people and I've spoken to many people that know. So I just want to know how you deal with it as a director and an actor if you came across somebody that you couldn't continue working with.
I wish, thank you for the question and the warning. I wish Ed was here to answer that.
Edward was attached to the movie probably 4 years before we started shooting it, so I got to know him fairly well. And I heard all the stories, and I'm going to just tell you my story. Yes, he can be a pain in the ass, no question. I'd be lying if I said that's not true. But Edward's pain in the ass is always coming from, truly, it's coming from a place, it's not coming from his ass, it's coming from his heart. He cares. And as much as, you know, and I've said this in front of Edward, so I'm not speaking out of turn, because we would drive each other crazy at times. And I wanted to strangle him at times. And other times, we would want to hug each other because we just had respect for each other. And in the end, always, Edward was always coming from a place of caring. So when you hear the stories about Edward being a pain in the ass, he just cares a lot. When he signs up for a movie, it's not for a paycheck. It's because there's something inside of him that he wants to explore that is somehow related to the story that we're telling, that we're trying to realize. And then Edward brings his ideas and his personality and his intelligence to that process. And I think that if you're insecure and you're not really specific about what you want, then things can start to happen. But it was never a problem. It's just because he's another guy. I can remember calling up Edward on a Sunday night. We'd be shooting on Monday. And I call him up, I said, Edward, you gotta come over. There's a scene I'm not sure about tomorrow. And he'd come right over. I mean, actors don't usually do that unless they really care. And that's, you know, in the end, as much as we would drive each other crazy, I would always walk away with, he cares. And I'd rather a guy who cares and can be deemed a pain in the ass than somebody who doesn't care and is just showing up. I take the guy who cares every day.
Se non ci sono altre domande io aggiungerei una cosa prima di chiudere, che chiaramente rivelerà quanto io da tanto tempo ammiro Colin Farrell, perché sin dall'inizio della sua carriera lui è sempre stato considerato in maniera molto superficiale una sorta di cattivo ragazzo, solo perché non si preoccupava di nascondere quello che aveva voglia di dire, diceva sempre la verità e soprattutto la diceva infiorandola molto di fuck, e questo in qualche modo condizionava a volte il giudizio di chi lo ascoltava. E qui abbiamo appena sentito dire della sua professionalità. Io vorrei aggiungere un piccolo aneddoto. Io ho avuto l'opportunità di vederlo sul set di Alexander, un film difficilissimo, lavorare molte ore in scene complicate, di battaglie, di massa, e quando tutti erano esausti lui era ancora lì pronto, disponibile, appunto, desideroso di andare avanti, di continuare, di approfondire il personaggio. E la cosa che volevo dire curiosa secondo me è che erano tutti talmente stanchi in una scena di battaglia che i cavalli erano molto professionali perché avevano tutto uno staff intorno di gente che li aveva selezionati, che sapeva come trattarli. Questo cavallo a un certo punto non ne poteva più, si è imbizzarrito. L'unica persona capace di calmarlo è stato Colin, che è andato vicino al cavallo e gli ha parlato, non so cosa ne abbia detto. Il cavallo immediatamente ha fatto un grande sbuffo di insofferenza e ha detto vabbè, andiamo avanti.
I said I'll turn you into a vat of fucking glue if you don't get back on your mark. It's Mr. Ed, he spoke and understood English.
Così, insomma, se una persona è capace di avere ancora questo contatto addirittura con il mondo animale, oltre con il mondo delle persone che lavorano intorno a lui, deve essere evidentemente una persona che ha una capacità particolare di adattamento e un grande interesse e una grande curiosità. Allora, tanto per trasformare questo inno in una domanda, diciamo, è cambiato qualcosa da allora?
Molto grazie.